Okay, this is part 4 of Wisdom and Womanhood, and we're going to talk about the proper roles and dispositions of men and women in this video. If you haven't watched part 3 on reproductive biology, please stop this video and do that. It's kind of long, but all of the information presented there is super important because biology matters. Not only does the biological design determine the roles men and women will play in the process of human reproduction, but it also gives us clues about what decisions are best in our lives. And so when we don't pay attention to the design, we miss out on opportunities to experience the most joy. You need to use wisdom, okay? That's what part 3 was all about, gaining that knowledge about your reproductive system so that you can now weigh your decisions against that knowledge. And when you do, it becomes very obvious that the roles and dispositions of men and women were designed to lead to more joy in the lives of individuals and in families and in society in general. So go back and watch part 3 if you haven't already. That information is going to be foundational to the discussion in this video and the remaining videos of the series. Okay, so there's a lot of talk in our society about what the roles of men and women should be. And the idea that those roles should be based on our design seems to be losing its place in that discussion by the day. So I need to address a few things about our current society before we start. You know, when I was younger and just moving into adulthood, people would say things to me like, "Oh, you're getting ready to take on the real world, huh?" Maybe you've heard something like that. And if you think about it, that kind of implies that the world you've been living in is not the real world, right? And we touched very briefly on this idea in part 2. Children do not comprehend the real world. They're not even aware of it. But as you move into adulthood, it's extremely important to understand what the real world is, because the joy you experience in life will depend, in large measure, on how accurate your beliefs and perceptions are about the real world. If your perceptions are inaccurate, you won't be able to make the best choices, right? So let's take just a minute to better understand what the real world is. The real world is potential. It's full of potential in both its opportunities and in its challenges. And most people are really good at imagining all of the opportunities they'll encounter in life. But they don't tend to think about all of the challenges, things that they would consider bad. And the truth is, we're kind of wired that way. It can be overwhelming to think about all of the potential bad things in life. But in order to experience the most joy, you're going to need to get better and better at considering anything bad, because if you don't, you can't factor those things into your decision-making, and you won't be prepared for them when they come along. It's like the story of the grasshopper and the ant. Even though it's summer, the ant knows that winter is coming, and he uses that knowledge to act in a way that best prepares him for winter. The grasshopper doesn't. He just keeps ignoring the fact that winter is coming, and in the end, he experiences more misery because of that. You have to learn to be like the ant. Okay, you have to get into the habit of thinking in terms of worst-case scenarios, because that's part of making the best decisions and experiencing the most joy. One of the reasons why people don't look to the design of men and women to establish their proper roles is the fact that our current society is like this land of illusion. Okay, there are a lot of things that keep us from having to think about worst-case scenarios. They keep us insulated from many of the harsh realities of the real world. Like the fact that basic survival in this world takes an extraordinary amount of work. Most people don't grow their own food, or fetch their own water, or dispose of their own waste, or fend off invaders, because we have systems in our society that do that for us. But if you think about it, those systems are pretty fragile. And if something happened to those systems, how well would you be able to do those things on your own? Because in reality, in the real world, those things are your responsibility to begin with. Another harsh reality that women don't like to think about is the fact that if those systems all went away, women would be far less likely to survive on their own than men. Okay? Just think about what it would be like to try to survive in very primitive conditions without tampons or pads or period cups or anything like that. A woman would automatically be at a serious disadvantage for about 5 days a month because of her period. But with all of those systems that we currently have in place, women forget that we are, biologically, less capable than men to take on all of the negative aspects of the real world. And so we, very unwisely, choose roles that don't align with reality. So let's get back to the design to find out what roles men and women have been designed for, okay? From the biology, we can easily see that men are meant to give. You see this in a man physically giving himself to a woman during sexual intercourse. You see it in the delivery of sperm into a woman's reproductive tract. And you even see it in the sperm's contribution of genetic material to an egg at fertilization. And where men are meant to give, women are meant to receive. You see that when a woman physically receives a man during intercourse. You see it when she receives a man's sperm into her reproductive tract. And you even see it when her egg receives the genetic material from a sperm at fertilization. So that whole giving-receiving thing should be really pretty obvious. It should also be obvious that men are designed to be constant and women are designed to change. In men, that constant release of FSH and LH results in a continuous production of sperm and testosterone and in a relative longevity of that production over the course of a man's lifetime. Okay? Men stay pretty constant. In women, that's not the case. They change. There are fluctuations in FSH and LH, which produce two hormones, the estrogen and progesterone, and all of the fluctuations in those hormones cause a woman's menstrual cycle and all of the changes that come with that. And her hormone levels and her fertility will change throughout her reproductive life until she reaches that final reproductive change of menopause when she is no longer able to have children. These basic differences in design cause differences in secondary sex characteristics and in temperament and in disposition. And because all of these things, the ability of men and women to cope with the real world is different too. They engage it differently. And that is reality. That is the way it is by definition, and you can't change it without encountering unintended consequences that are less than good. So let's start like we did in part 3 with the men for just a minute. The potential opportunities and challenges in the real world are constant, and they are unrelenting. There are always opportunities to take, and there are always challenges to face. And so men are designed to meet those opportunities and challenges in the same way. They're designed to be just as constant and just as unrelenting. Remember what testosterone does? Okay, it improves a man, right? And a good man will use those improvements in himself to improve the world around him. The increases in strength and endurance and memory and confidence and all of those things should translate into masculine qualities, characteristics that make a man capable of not only engaging the real world, but of also making significant improvements to the real world. These characteristics, they're just some of them, and I'm not going to take the time to define each of these words, even though I would love to. And you should, okay? You should, so that you know what to expect to see in a good man. And I highly recommend using Noah Webster's 1828 dictionary. You can get it for like $3 as an app on your phone. It's worth it. But anyway, these are qualities that a man should have as a result of testosterone. And a good man will purposely, intentionally cultivate them and use them to improve the world around him. And he will do that constantly because that's what he's designed to do. The constant production of testosterone enables a man to be constant in that masculinity. In constancy alone, men are designed to improve the world in a way that women cannot, because women are not constant. Women are meant to change. Remember the squiggly lines on this slide? Okay, those fluctuations in FSH and LH and estrogen and progesterone. A woman will never be as constant and as unrelenting as the world is because she can't be. She can't be constant and fulfill her design. These are different phases a woman is designed to go through. There isn't a phase on this list that she can stay in and remain true to her design. Okay, think about this. What phase would you want her to stay in? If she remained in any phase where she's not pregnant, that would be very bad reproductive design. Okay, so let's go to the other extreme and say she gets pregnant. Would you want her to stay pregnant? that would also be very bad reproductive design, right? That baby kind of needs to come out sometime. So you've got labor and delivery where the baby comes out. A woman's not going to want to stay in that phase, and you don't want her to either. You don't want her constantly breastfeeding or ovulating or menstruating. You don't want her constantly anything. Why? Because a woman is designed to accommodate the growth and development of other human beings, and that requires change. Even within each of these phases, there are phases. She has to pass through those phases. And because she does, she's incapable of contending with the real world constantly like a man can. Even if she could be constant, which she can't, it would never be in the same way as a man because a woman is mainly a product of estrogen and not testosterone, okay? Nothing on this list increases in a way that would give a woman a considerable advantage in taking on the real world. Anything that you might consider an increase only underscores the fact that women are designed to care for children. Estrogen doesn't improve like testosterone does. In general, estrogen regulates and maintains. It does not improve. And so consequently, women are not designed to give, not to men anyway. A woman is designed to receive from a man. Unfortunately, women have been conditioned to believe that feminine nature, that disposition to change and that disposition to receive, is something that is less than good. But feminine nature is only less than good in environments that are not suited to feminine nature. Okay, so let's go back to the men for just a minute. A good man will realize that one of the best things he can do to improve the world around him is to create an environment that is insulated from the real world. He kind of needs that for his own survival, but it also creates an environment suitable for others who are not designed to contend with the real world, namely women and children. Establishing a good home enables a man to improve the world in 4 specific ways. Number 1, it improves the situation for a woman by creating an environment that is suitable to her feminine nature. Number 2, it enables a woman to be improved. Number 3, it creates a good situation for any future children that the woman will have. And number 4, in the long term, it improves society. The first point should be obvious, given our discussion so far. Okay, a woman by herself in the real world is not a good situation. But when a woman comes under the committed care of a good man who has established a good home, she's able to thrive because women are designed to maintain and they're designed to be mothers. That's why marriage was instituted. Okay, marriages are meant to be committed relationships in which a man immediately improves a woman's situation by taking responsibility for her and by providing her an environment that she is capable of maintaining, because there she's insulated from many of the negative aspects of the real world. Point number 2, a good home also enables a woman to be improved. That's actually where we get the word matrimony. Did you know that? Have you ever heard of people getting married and entering the bonds of matrimony? The matre part at the beginning of the word, the M-A-T-R-I, that part means mother, and it can be found in words like matriarch and matrix. The word matrimony means the making of a mother. A woman is designed to be a mother, and she's not actually physiologically complete if she doesn't become a mother. And men are designed to be fathers, but if you think about it from a strictly physiological standpoint, a functional standpoint, a man's reproductive system can do everything it was designed to do without a woman. A woman cannot do the same. A woman's reproductive system is designed to give life to another human being, and a woman can't do that without a man. People don't talk about the fact that becoming a mother is actually a very important part of a woman's development because it runs counter to what our culture teaches us about women. Our society teaches women that they don't need men, but that's just not true. And you might say, okay, well, she fulfills her design by becoming a mother, but how does becoming a mother actually improve her, right? Well, we talked a little bit about this in part 3 with the release of oxytocin during childbirth and breastfeeding, and how the levels of oxytocin and oxytocin receptor sites in the brain are never as high as they are during those experiences. Before a woman has a baby, She's made to think in terms of receiving, primarily anyway. And that's a good thing, actually, because it's in her best interest to find a good man from whom she can receive. But remember that there's more potential for joy when we consider the joy of others, right? And the experience of childbirth is meant to unlock a woman's full capacity to love others. It's meant to help her change, yet again, from a person who receives to a person who better comprehends the potential joy in giving to others. I really wanted to try to describe what that oxytocin hit is like, but it's just so incredibly difficult to do. So I came up with this little analogy. It's kind of silly, but hopefully it helps, okay? It's almost like one of those test your strength carnival games. Have you seen those? Where you hit a lever with a sledgehammer and you see how high you can get some marker up a vertical column, okay? So pretend for just a moment that you are trying to swing that sledgehammer when you're really wimpy, okay? You don't know that you're wimpy. Actually, you think you're pretty strong. But you pick up that sledgehammer and you give it your best swing, and gravity does most of the work when the hammer drops, and the marker moves slightly up that vertical column, okay? Now suppose someone gives you this magic potion that makes you like 100 times stronger for one swing of the sledgehammer. And you swing that sledgehammer, and the marker flies to the top of that column and hits that bell. And while that is happening, you are hyper aware of the difference in strength that potion caused, and of the sense of fulfillment in having that strength that enabled you to hit that bell. Then the effects of the potion go away, but the memory of the experience doesn't. And the person who gave you the potion tells you that now, because you know what that feels like, you can actually get the effects of that potion on your own. And all you have to do is remember what that strength felt like, and it comes back to you. And then you can use that strength to do many other things far beyond playing a carnival game. Childbirth does the same thing for a woman's capacity to love. The release of oxytocin during childbirth and breastfeeding causes a woman to experience a measure of love for another human being that she will have never experienced before in her life. And that's not to say that a woman can't feel some degree of love before she has a baby, but she literally cannot feel the same intensity of love. The levels of oxytocin are never as high as they are during childbirth. The number of receptor sites in the brain are never as high as they are during childbirth. And therefore, the perception of love that the woman feels during childbirth far surpasses anything she has ever felt before. And that experience is meant to change a woman behaviorally. And it does. I mentioned in part 3 how studies show that high blood levels of oxytocin during labor correlate with better mothering behavior after a baby's birth. But it's meant to be so much more than that. That hit of oxytocin is meant to make a woman better able to comprehend the love she's capable of giving to others, too, not just her child. It's supposed to teach her that she has the capacity to love all people in the same way. And I'm just going to quickly mention here that there's this trend in our society to use the term birthing person, and this is not a good trend because it divorces the birthing process from this bonding process that we're talking about. It gets people to think that all there is to childbirth is the birth of a child, and that it's generic and unfeeling, and that there isn't a unique bond between a woman and her child. And that's false. You can actually sense it. If you have to, pause the video for just a minute and say birthing person, and pay very close attention to the thoughts that come to your mind, and then say mother and do the same. You're going to find that mother is just so rich in nuances, and birthing person is just so sterile. It's unfeeling, and there's no humanity in it. In fact, it breeds inhumanity. It leaves out the idea of a deeply bonded, emotional connection that a mother is meant to have with her child. Terms like birthing person convey ideas that are definitely less than good. So we should really think twice before we integrate them into our language. Okay, so a woman is improved by becoming a mother, and children come along, right? They're going to be the natural result. And children are even less capable than a woman is to contend with the real world. So it's good for children to come into a good home. Children need that insulated space until they can contend with reality themselves. Okay, that's point number 3. And point number 4 is that in the long term, overseeing the upbringing of a family has the potential to positively influence society for generations to come. Very few men will see this as the purpose of their sex drive or their reproductive system and all of the secondary sex characteristics that come with it. But a good man will. A good man, a moral man, will see his strong sex drive as motivation to give to and to care for a woman, to improve her and her situation, to raise good children who become good adults, and to consequently leave a legacy of improvement in society. A woman's role fully complements a man's role. A good woman will receive and maintain a home by making a lifetime commitment to a good man who provides that home to her. A good woman will look for ways to be improved, not the least of which is by becoming a mother. So many women get married, but they don't have children, and they don't realize that it's through childbearing that they are improved and fulfill their design. She sees the raising of children as an opportunity to instill good character into young people during their formative years. And a good woman will extend herself to others, first and foremost to her husband, who gives her the opportunity to have that improved situation, and then to her children, and then to others outside of her home, especially in her later years when she no longer has children at home. I think it's really pretty cool that in a way, a woman's reproductive life mirrors that of the follicle itself. When she's a child, she's kind of like a primordial follicle, right? She's immature, not fully developed. And puberty is like the first 14 days of the menstrual cycle, where the follicle goes through a process of development. And then ovulation is like the short reproductive years where pregnancy becomes possible. And the years surrounding menopause and beyond are like the luteal phase, where there might not be, the possibility of getting pregnant, but she can still have a positive influence on others, just like the corpus luteum promotes the development of the uterus in preparation for pregnancy, right, with the production of progesterone, even as that corpus luteum degenerates and dies, right? Older women, even though their childbearing years are over, they're meant to continue in that spirit of nurturing and teaching and caring for others. Now, women have some challenges to face in taking on these roles. In some ways, because of her dispositions to change and to receive, a woman can very easily become her own worst enemy. And we'll talk more about that in the next video on dating and marriage. But in addition to that, there's that land of illusion that we live in, and it teaches women to incorrectly value things. It becomes easy for women to forget how valuable the roles of husband and wife and father and mother are, to the point where we reduce a husband or a wife to a partner, and fathers and mothers to sperm donors and birthing persons. And if the roles aren't important, why should we develop qualities that would help us fulfill those roles? Those things quickly become undervalued, and we start to overvalue things that aren't as important. We get caught up in looking good. We get caught up in personal pursuits that neglect other people, which is not moral, remember, so it can't be good. And we start believing in ideologies that are detrimental to society. Right now, our current culture is promoting ideas and practices that completely disregard and even change the design of men and women. And that's a really big deal. It's not going to end well. It's throwing common sense out the window. It's like taking a hammer to a loaf of bread and insisting that you can get the same result cutting that bread that you would get from using a bread knife. It's not going to happen. People are going to be miserable because joy is based in things that are good, and things are only good when they're used according to their design. There's misery in anything else, and the further men and women move away from their intended roles, the more misery there's going to be. Our culture is teaching young people a lot of lies right now, and you're going to need to fight against them if you're going to encounter the most joy in life. It tries to teach you that your decisions don't affect anyone but you, especially when it comes to choices regarding your reproductive system. But that's just not true. Your reproductive system is the one system that is designed with others in mind. And the decisions you make regarding your reproductive system will have consequences for people immediately around you and for the generations who come after you, who don't even exist yet. Your reproductive system is for reproduction, in spite of how our culture tries to teach us otherwise. It's not just for gratification. It's meant to give you a sense of fulfillment. And those two things, gratification and fulfillment, are not the same. Men and women need each other to be fulfilled and complete. And because anything less than what is best leads to some degree of misery, when we stray from those roles we were designed to play, we will never get the best results or encounter the most joy. The reason why marriage and families have lasted so long throughout history is because when individuals understand and perform the roles that they are meant to play in those families are good. They're good because they work with the biological design and because they take into consideration the best outcomes for everyone involved, even and especially in worst-case scenarios. In other words, they're moral. In marriage, good men and women commit themselves not so much to each other, but to their unique roles, which unite them in a common purpose. And that creates the most stable and the most nurturing environment for children, where high morals and good principles can be taught to the next generation of society. That is how men and women best experience the fulfillment and joy that is meant to come from their reproductive design. In the next video, we're going to be talking a little bit more about biology, and we're going to talk about some strategies to use in dating and marriage that are based on that biology. So come back for part 5.